But, for me, I really reflect on some of the challenges that we're facing, and I'll focus on my community a little bit of Surrey White Rock. I think that you look at where we are and where we've come, and you look at the fact is that we recently had a throne speech that I don't think people on the other side of the house are going to be surprised to hear me say it was completely underwhelming, given the challenges that we are facing every single day. And these are big challenges, and these are challenges that I'm sure I just didn't hear at the doorstep, but I'm sure 92 other people heard at the doorsteps during the last election campaign. We have right now in my community the most people ever utilizing the food bank. Long lineups. And when you go there and you look at the faces of the people that are getting food, a lot of them for the first time. And they're doing it with their small kids. They're doing it in wheelchairs, so they're elderly. They're doing it because they've got nowhere else to go. And even worse than that, if you go to some of the local shops, whether it's London Drugs or whether it's Save On Foods, I know now, I know them by name, the security undercover officers that are in there every single day. Because people are shoplifting 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day in those stores. Some of them are shoplifting because they have no choice. Others are shoplifting as a means to make money off the backs of other people. And when we talk about the failures that this government's had when it comes to law and order, we have to look at the impacts that has on affordability as well. So when you go into those small stores or some of the larger ones, whether it be London Drugs or Save On Foods, and you ask them directly if they've had to increase their prices to combat the fact that they have thousands and thousands of dollars walking out their store every single day. That's the reality they're facing. Actually, last year at the Save On Foods in White Rock, somebody filled up their buggy, batteries, shavers, T-bone steaks, and they took their buggy and they casually were walking out. And then the store manager and a cashier said, "What are you doing? Can you stop?" That person turned around, they pulled out bear spray, and they sprayed them both in the face. That's the second time that's happened in that store. And I think the fact is that, my community of Surrey White Rock is not immune to the challenges that every other community in this province is seeing right now. But I think what people are struggling with, what British Columbians are struggling with, what my constituents are struggling with, is the fact in this throne speech and in the campaign, this government really should use the slogan, "We overpromise and we underdeliver." On almost every single thing they touch, they overpromise and they underdeliver. We're going to eliminate portables in Surrey. You overpromised and you really, really underdelivered on that one. Through the chair, Madam Speaker. But the fact is that in Surrey right now, not one single portable will be moved. And some may think that's a good thing, but here's the challenge with that. To move a portable in Surrey, it's $160,000 out of the operating budget of the Surrey School District. So now what we have, because of the shortfall of the funding that this government continues to do for the city of Surrey, we have portables that are sitting on playgrounds in all-weather fields, taking up space. And when it comes to education, I'll speak on this one because it's in my riding, and I know that It's an important one for some of my colleagues, and I think some of my colleagues have actually had children that have gone to this place, is I look at it, and this is a government that has campaigned on fighting for the little guy. So we have a place that has worked for decades called the South Surrey White Rock Learning Centre. And this is an institution, it's saved lives. It has saved lives. There's no doubt about it. It's where kids have gone successfully that don't feel that they can be supported or that they belong in a mainstream school setting. So they go here. And actually, at one of the rallies that I attended with my colleague from Surrey Panorama, a young girl came up and she had graduated there, and she said that she had been over dozens and dozens of foster homes, and this was the place that she felt safe. This was her home. She'd already graduated, but she was out there fighting for the kids that were going to come through that school. And that school is going to close down in June of this year because they got a letter from the school district saying that they were going to terminate the lease. And that lease is under $200,000 per annum. And I want to put that in context. So when this government comes back after the October election, and I'll talk about the grocery rebate that was promised and then reneged. As if we're going to do things different. We've heard you. We're listening now. We're listening. In the throne speech, it didn't look like they were listening, but how did they listen? The first things this premier did was he gave an over $270,000 severance package to his top advisor who has served less than 2 years. That's listening. Almost every NDP MLA minus one got a pay bump. That's listening, right? I know who he's listening to. He's listening to somebody or some people. But he's not listening to people on the ground that are struggling every day. That is not happening. There is a major disconnect there. And a previous speaker talked about the not the renter's rebate, that was another reneged promise, I'll get to that in a second, but the grocery rebate that was promised. And they mentioned how everything changed on November 25th. We're already 40 days past an election at that point. If that was your number one signature commitment to the people of British Columbia, if the premier got up and said, this is the number one thing that I am going to do, 40 days later, and he can't even make that commitment firm, there was never an intention to do this rebate. And I think that that's what British Columbians are struggling with in this throne speech, and they're struggling with this government. These are tough times. They're tough times for British Columbians. They're tough time for Canadians. We understand that. And we need to fight for every single British Columbian, whether they're in our riding or they're not. But we have to do it with transparency. And transparency has been something that this government has continued to struggle with. And it's come at the cost of people. Like, if you think about the fact that we've got, and we'll look at healthcare for a second. And you look at the wait times that we were seeing at Surrey Memorial, Peace Arch Hospital. Surrey Memorial had wait times of up to 18 hours. 18 hours. Peace Arch Hospital, wait times over 10 hours. We went on diversion for the first time this summer. And people are trying to figure out why. There's frustrations with the healthcare system. Why people have a lack of faith in the leadership, whether it's at our health authorities or with the premier or with the minister. You know, there's one story, and it signifies, I think, everything that is going wrong with our healthcare system. And it was an individual in Surrey, and it was last year, and they went in and they were diagnosed with cancer. And the doctor said, if we can get in and we get you surgery within the next month, I'm very, very confident that we can get it. And this was January. Couldn't get the surgery, and by mid-February, and I've told this story in the house before, by mid-February, this individual had excruciating stomach pains, and they went into Surrey Memorial. And they laid in a bed outside by the ambulance loading bay for about a week, right? Family brought in blankets and extra pillows. The doctor then came in after they had the scan and said, I'm sorry, your cancer's progressed so badly that surgery is no longer an option and there's nothing we can do for you anymore. That doctor had to have that conversation with somebody outside of a ambulance loading bay at Surrey Memorial Hospital. So if people wonder why there's a lack of confidence, a lack of leadership with this government, with that health authority, I think that answer is pretty clear. You know, I talked about the challenges that we see with education, and I think one of the other challenges that we see is obviously to do with our transportation sector as well. And again, it's a government that continues to overpromise and underdeliver. Now, I know that we've talked, and I'll talk about the Massey Crossing shortly here, but I live in a community, if you go down by the border, Douglas Crossing, right? It's a community of thousands of families, right? Right where the truck crossing is by the Peace Arch Duty Free shop, there is absolutely zero public transit there. There's none. In fact, if my son wants to take the bus, he's got to walk all the way up 176th Street, go all the way down 8th Avenue, cross King George Highway, which he'd never be allowed to do, then cross Highway 99, then walk up King George again to 24th for a bus that comes once an hour. That is currently the public transportation in that area. I don't think that's acceptable at this point. Right? I think that we have to realize that this government has continued to come up short in every measurable that we have. And at some point, there has to be accountability. And I understand that the challenges that we face under tariffs, and I'm not immune to that at all. I could not live closer to the US border than I do right now. But I'll say one thing, and it's important, and I think it's a lesson. Our words matter. Our words as elected officials matter, whether we're in this house or we're outside of it. We've seen over the last number of years some horrific things happen on our world stage. Horrific. So, when we hear the Premier of the province state yesterday and compare a house being bombed to a foreclosure, Those are two very, very different things. And that is a very, very dangerous, sloppy comparison. Now, I've met people that have had their house bombed. I've met people that have had their house foreclosed on. Very, very tragic. One is a very, very violent act. So we have to be very, very careful about the words that we use inside of this house and outside of it. But comparing a foreclosure to a house getting bombed, to me, is completely unacceptable. Those are two very, very different things. You know, we look at the challenges, and again, we look at some of the needs, and we have a lot of newcomers coming to my community of Surrey, a lot of newcomers coming to my community of White Rock, and the housing shortages that we have, the lack of rental spaces that we have. And the fact remains that this is a government, when it comes to housing, has absolutely failed. And now the panic sets in. We haven't done anything. We haven't done enough. What are we going to do? And so we come up with things like Bill 44. Bill 44 will cost the city of Surrey $800 million. $800 million, Bill 44 will cost. Because they weren't prepared for the infrastructure upgrades. We already know through my previous comments, they definitely weren't prepared for the students that were coming in. They're still not. Right? The hospitals, the doctors, all of that stuff, we're not there. But we are now, and I know that there's former mayors and councillors sitting on both sides of the house, but we are now absolutely taking away the fundamental democracy of municipal governments. We're saying we know best. The Premier knows best. So when it comes to Bill 44 in my community, I don't know if anybody ever goes down to White Rock Beach and gets fish and chips or walks the promenade. It's a beautiful spot. And you'll see one of the biggest hills up there, and that's Oxford Hill. Right? Oxford. I would love for the Premier, the Minister of Housing, to come to Oxford and say, how are you going to put 4 to 6 units on one of those lots? How is that even feasible? But they know best, because they've told the municipality, the city of White Rock, that that will happen. And by the way, we're going to scrap any public hearing to do with that as well. But that is going to happen. They know better than that municipality. They know better than the residents of White Rock. I can tell you that will not work on that landscape. It will, geographically, it will not work. And from a community perspective, it will not work. Where are these people going to park? Because there's no rapid transit there. That hasn't happened. Right? Where are they going to go to school? What hospital are they going to use? Like, where are they going to put their garbage cans on Mondays? It's not feasible, because government has not done the work. This NDP government has not done the work. And I think that that's why the frustration came in October. Better call that. But that's the challenge that we have. And I can say this is that when it comes to housing, and when it comes to the infrastructure that this government is mandating get built in my community, I have a number of seniors, low-income seniors in my riding. And they've been there for generations. And I desperately want to make sure that they stay in my riding. But the challenge that they've got is that when you look at these dem evictions that are coming, because the municipalities are trying to keep up with these mandates that government is imposing on them, there's nowhere for them to go. There's nowhere for them to go. And that is a fundamental challenge that this government hasn't grasped because they haven't done the work. Again, go to Crescent Beach and tell the citizens of Surrey what Bill 44 is going to mean to them. They haven't done that work. I've done it, and I can tell you what the reaction is. It's not good. Some areas, that may work. I can tell you if you go to Oxford, anybody here drive to Oxford, you will know it will not work. Government should know that. They should have done that work. They should have talked to the residents. They should have talked to the municipalities, but they choose not to. It's unfortunate. You know, I think one of the other things too that's frustrating people is, you know, government has expanded. It's gotten big. But has it gotten better? Absolutely not. Every metric I've mentioned that they're failing at, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's transportation, nobody's given them a passing grade. And this was well before any talk of tariffs. We already knew it, and that's why there was no intention to do a $1,000 rebate. They know they couldn't do it. We'll say it because we want to get elected, but we're not going to follow through on that. It was the same thing that this government did with the renter's rebate. Campaigned on it 3 times, and then eventually panicked and did something where people had to fill it all, and it was a complete gong show. Again, overpromise and underdeliver. Massey Crossing, overpromise, underdeliver. People should be crossing that bridge today. It's 5 o'clock. I guarantee you that it is absolute gridlock there right now. In either direction. No rapid transit going back and forth. 2 years. 2 years that bridge should have been open. And you wouldn't be facing this at 5 o'clock. Right now, there is a dad or a mom trying to get home to get their kids to soccer, baseball, whatever it is, or get to a medical appointment, and they're not able to do it. Because they're stuck in gridlock because this government knew better. They knew better, so they wasted $100 million of taxpayers' money on preload because they knew better. Say the same thing about Batilla Bridge, right? They know better. Say the same thing about the Cloverdale Hospital. They know better. No ICU. No maternity ward. No transportation in. Don't know where people are going to park. They know better. Because they're not talking to the doctors. They're not talking to the other frontline workers. I don't know who they're talking to. They're not talking to the people at the doors. That's evident. If you keep talking to yourself, then maybe you come to the conclusions. That's the only thing that I can think that they're doing. How else would you rationalize some of these decisions that are coming out of the Premier's office? First priority, $279,000 to my chief of staff for a severance. Served less than 2 years. Longest lines at the food bank that we've ever seen. That's my priority. Second priority, I got to make sure that every NDP MLA is taken care of, minus I think maybe one, unfortunate one, but everybody gets a top up, everybody gets a title, everybody gets additional compensation. I don't think when British Columbians went to the poll, that's what they were signing up for. Especially when the Premier says, I've heard you, I'm going to do things differently. Well, if that's different, that's not a good sign. I think we're in a lot of trouble. You know, again, I think what people are worried about is that this is a government that is already tired. We've seen that in the throne speech. They've run out of ideas, and they're getting desperate. And I put the politics aside. For British Columbians, that's not a good thing. And so, Madam Speaker, I want to really amplify the point that, they talk about these list of projects that we're going to fast track and we're going to get moving, we're going to do all these things, and it's a lot of hurry up and wait. But before November 25th, why weren't we doing that stuff anyways? Why weren't we standing up for the mining sector? Why weren't we standing up for the forestry sector? Why weren't we being proud of an LNG sector? A lot of it they were ashamed of. But now, we got to go. We got to go. We got to get all this stuff built. Some stuff we're not going to have, they can go through they're not going to go through an EA process, right? Other stuff, we'll see how things go. But the reality of the day is, this government's going to pick winners and losers. But they are not going to put British Columbians as their number one priority, and we've seen that. If they did, the changes that happened at Fraser Health would have happened a long time ago. It wouldn't have happened yesterday, it would have happened a long time ago. But the fact of the matter is that this government continues to gaslight some of the people that are laying it out there every single day, whether it's our frontline workers, whether it's even firefighters that are fighting for the basic coverages from WorkSafe, who's sitting on a massive surplus, just trying to get their hip fixed that they got on a workplace injury. A firefighter who's going to battle every single day to say, can you help me here? And I think at the end of the day, for the Premier to come out and say, I'm listening, I don't think British Columbians at all are feeling hurt. So thank you for my time, Madam Speaker, and I'll take my seat.